Career Cafe, a podcast to help you thrive in the professional world. Today's episode, From Candidate to Contributor, Aligning Yourself with the Ideal Job, we're going to be talking about all of things to help you find a job that aligns with your skills, values, and career aspirations. Joining us today, we have Brandon Street and special guest Madalyn Swanson and myself, the moderator. So Madalyn, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Hello, everyone. I'm Madalyn Swanson. I am the Business Career Services Coordinator here at Southern Utah University. And I've had a career in higher education that ranged from career services to faculty development and academic advising. And right now I work specifically helping business students find careers.
Awesome. Thanks, Madalyn. We're excited to have you today. Let's just jump right in. I wanted to get an understanding of how our candidates and our students and listeners specifically can align themselves to a job with their specific skills and values and goals, and finding a good job for them that reflects their values and their skills, right?
Yeah, one thing I'd suggest to individuals out there who are trying to find jobs that align to them is first identify who you are, meaning, what are my skills that I have? What do I value in a job? What are my career goals? And starting with skills, I think there's a few things that you can do to help identify your own skills, because I think at times we might, our own skills are hidden from us, right? We don't know what they are. We can't identify all the skills that we have. And sometimes we need help of others or things to help us do that. And so a couple things I might suggest to our listeners as they're trying to identify their own skills, I would start by writing down all the skills you can think of. So go to a particular job you had, write down all the skills that you can think of that you obtained from that job, right? And maybe pull the job ad out and write down the skills they said you should have had too, right? But then talk to people who are close to you, maybe a colleague who is on the job with you or who is on the job with you, and ask them, hey, what are some of my skills that you see I employ each day on the job? And then talk to close family, relatives, and kind of expand that list a little bit till you feel like you have a good collection of skills that came from the job you have, but also that people identify in you in general. I think that's just a great way to start identifying your own skills. One other thing I might suggest, there are great resources like ONET Online, if you're not familiar with ONET Online. ONETonline.org is a place that you can go and punch in a certain type of job and learn about those jobs, but also you can put in your own jobs that you had and identify the skills and things, duties, skills that you should have learned from those things. So a great way to identify what skills you have.
Brandon, I would also recommend that you look back if you've had any performance reviews and see some things that maybe your supervisor found out were really, really great. Or even faculty members might give you feedback on assignments like attention to detail or things like that. And you can really find those skills. I think in our culture, we're taught we can't brag about ourselves. So we have a hard time finding these skills. But when you sit down and look at it, really look and examine yourself in multiple different areas.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I sit down with students all the time who are like, I don't want to brag about myself. I said, well, you're not bragging. You've got to tell people the reality of what you've learned. If you don't tell them, no one else is going to do it for you, right?
Exactly. You're selling yourself.
Right, exactly. One other thing I suggest, values. Identify what you value in a job, because you might be able to get a job which aligns with your skills, but if you don't like that job because it doesn't align with your values, I mean, you're going to be short term in that type of job, right? And so identify what you really want out of a job. When I was getting into my career, I knew that I wanted a career where I was available to my family. And so I wanted to ensure I found a job that was more of an 8-to-5 job with weekends off, where I didn't travel a lot, because I wanted to be there with my family for my kids as they were growing up, and that was my own. You may value something different, and that's okay. It really is okay. If you value travel, then find a job where you're going to do that. If you value money, then identify jobs that are going to pay you, right? But find out what you do value in a job and make sure you're aligning that with your skills as well.
Brandon, that's so great. When I meet with students first, that's the first question I ask is, what do you want your life to look like 5 years past graduation? And that really helps define those values.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for sharing this. I think it's really important to find a good job for you too, right? A lot of what we've talked about in this podcast so far is, how can you help the employer? But of course, we wanted to have a whole episode devoted to this, right? You want a good fit for you too.
Right, absolutely.
Right? And in the interview and all of that, we talk about how you can benefit the employer, but how can they benefit you, right? So Thanks for touching on that. I wanted to talk about now diving into the employers, right? the importance of researching industries, specific employers, and maybe different resources we have here at Southern Utah University to share with our students and listeners.
Yeah, so once you know about who you are, you need to be able to find those jobs that align with you and those types of careers. And so one thing I'd suggest is, once you've identified those things, try to find companies that fit who you are. A lot of times, especially our students, know about the major companies that are out there, but often they miss those mid companies that are out there that could fit them so well and they could grow well in, right? And so, there's lots of tools to be able to find companies out there you may not be aware of. I mean, obviously, just a simple Google search on what career you want and companies that have that. But there's also one I'm aware of called Firm Find. It's one, at least in the state of Utah, the Department of Workforce Services has this tool for you to be able to identify all of the companies that are registered with them who fit whatever keyword you put in. So if it's engineer, for example, you put that in, it'll show you all the engineering companies and how many employers are there. So you can see, is this a major employer? Is it a mid-employer? Is it a startup company, right? And again, you could then look them up and identify, do they kind of align with the skills you have? And again, those values and goals you have in a job.
No, that's a great resource. Even conducting a simple job search and finding out, okay, what company is in those keywords. A lot of times people don't start looking at jobs until when they're close to graduation. But by doing that sooner, you can start to identify companies that are hiring in those areas. And you can also find out the skills that they're looking for. And if you need to work on those skills, you can start adapting them now.
I love that. Yeah, I do that same thing with students is find a couple job ads now. I mean, even for the ones you graduate 3 years from now, find what those are because you can identify very quickly. These are the skills I need. This is how I could grow and be ready for this job.
I just had a student ask me, am I on the right major? And I said, hey, what are the jobs saying?
Yeah.
And it completely blew her mind. So
love that. Yeah, one other thing, I'd talk about, I think is really important is to identify, we always try to identify what you'd be doing on the job, but who are you working for, right? Like, again, when we talk about values and what you want, you're going to be spending at least 40 hours a week with colleagues you're going to be working with at a company you're going to be with. So you need to identify who are they? What do they value? What's their culture? What do they create in a team, and who would I be working with? Because it's really important to understand, again, who would I be working with at least 40 hours a week? I spend as much time during the week with my colleagues as I do with my family at times, right, during the week. And so it's important to make sure I can identify you'll enjoy your career by understanding those types of things about a company as well.
And you can find those things like on glassdoor.com. That's a great resource. There are reviews for companies. Now, you have to always take those reviews with a grain of salt, but you can go through and you can see common negatives or common positives, and you can find out, are those negatives something that I can work with? Are those positives something that really means something to me? I think that's wildly important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another way to do that is through social media too, LinkedIn, those types of sites where you can go and learn more about a company and what people are posting about their company, right? And things like that as well. You can learn a lot from those types of things as well. Or if it's crickets, maybe they're not posting anything and you're wondering, what's going on there. But it's a great opportunity to get on there and find people that perhaps even ask a few people on there what their experience is like with a certain company, right?
An informational interview is invaluable when starting your job search and aligning your skills and asking those questions. That's why we always recommend that you ask, why do you love working for that company? And you can really get an interesting answer and watch body language, things like that.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, Madalyn, you just said aligning your skills, right, to a specific company. We've talked about understanding your value, right, understanding what employers are even out there, how to find them. But what about aligning your skills and experiences to a specific company and job, right?
Right. I mean, we touched on about like searching jobs and finding, looking for job titles, and doing that sooner rather than later is wildly important because they're telling you what they want. We spend so much time guessing and putting things on our resume because we think that's what people want when they're truly telling us what they're looking for. And so if you have a company that you want to work for, if you look for a job 2 to 3 years in the future, you can start getting jobs while you're in school that can help you refine those skills that maybe you don't have just yet.
Another I just thought of, we talked about this, having students go and finding job ads, and I love this technique, and again, I use that as well. But But there's also things like the Occupational Outlook Handbook that you can get on and see what they identify you should be doing now to prepare yourself for a certain career. It lays out skills you should have. It lays out those types of things, the knowledge you need to have, how to prepare for those things. And I love that because, again, if we have a career goal to become something, we need to identify how do we build a roadmap to get there. I think sometimes we feel like, oh, that person just stumbled into that job. And that does happen. But we can be a little bit more strategic on preparing ourselves to get there. And that's not only laying out what we need to do as far as experiences and developing ourselves, but also who are the people I need to know along the way, right? Like I can be intentional in creating a network of people that might help me get where I want to be when I'm ready for that.
Brandon, that's such a good use. I actually, when we do informational interviews, if it's a company that student is really interested in and we connect them with someone at that company, I always have them ask the question, what advice would you give me, someone who's trying to get a job at your company? And that really helps too, because their process might be different. The way they evaluate, they might look at one skill higher than another skill, even though both are listed on that job description.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. One thing I'd suggest to our listeners as well is, as you start looking to apply for jobs, and we've talked about this, in our other episodes, but this is where the importance of then taking the skills and knowledge you have after evaluating those things and tailoring your documents to ensure that you're showcasing you have the background of those, knowledge, skills, and abilities that employers looking for, and helping them, and that's what I always, say to those who are working with resumes, help the employer understand why you're a good candidate. I think there's nothing more frustrating to an employer than seeing a bunch of resumes and they cannot identify anybody who looks like a great candidate because we don't know how to do that necessarily at times, right? And so be intentional in helping them understand once you develop those skills, how you have those through those documents.
Employers love to find that information quickly so they can move on and get you in for that interview. And I think that's such good advice, Brandon. I actually recommend that students have multiple resumes at the ready for their different industries that they're interested in. Once you start to identify those industries, then it makes it even easier to customize when you're doing your job search. So you're not recreating the wheel each time.
Absolutely. And one other thing I might suggest, I think a lot of people worry like, well, if I'm changing a career from one career to another, how do I translate the skills into a new career? And I think we underestimate, again, the skills that we have. That's why it's important to identify them first, right? But once we've done that, then we can take our resume and really not talk about what we did on the job holistically, but as much or more on, again, the skills that we learned and things that will translate directly to that. Because I think there's many more skills that translate than don't at times, and we undersell that a lot.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think most employers know that they're going to have to train their new employees on the aspects of their job, but you can't teach some of those intangible transferable skills like work ethic or customer service or the ability to communicate effectively. Yes, you can refine, but if that person comes in with those skills already, they're a better candidate than someone who may not.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting along with people, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's a
gosh.
big one for employers. Just, okay, can you just come in and get along with other people? Be
Can
a
you just be
positive.
nice?
Exactly, right.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing those tips for us. I think some of those resources you shared are invaluable for our students and for our listeners in general. We know the number one way people get jobs is through what?
Networking.
Love it. I'm so hopeful you guys are gonna say that in unison. So
Wow.
thank
Yeah,
you.
look at that.
Yeah, networking's huge, right? We talk about job search and aligning yourself and finding a good job and an employer and a company who have good values, right, that align with yours. But what about networking in this process, right? This is such a huge thing. So let's talk about some strategies for our listeners on how to network effectively and build those connections.
Oh, there's so many different things that you can do to build your network. SU has a wonderful alumni network, and I would love to see people use SU Connect and LinkedIn as a way to reach out to those folks. There's a great feature on LinkedIn where you can search alumni in certain job fields and then conduct, but then there's also industry events, things like that. Find out an association associated to the career that you want to go into, like the Utah Association of Public Accountants. That could be one. And you could go to those events where you could network with people in that career. And I know they welcome undergraduate students. There's also, there's just so many different opportunities, even if you don't have someone close by. Like here at SU, we're kind of geographically isolated. So we use LinkedIn a lot.
Yeah, and honestly, and I know many of you alumni will resonate with this. I'm an alum of SCU. We want to give back to our students. I always looked for ways. I mean, I was poor when I was first out of SCU. Let's be honest. I had no money to give back to the university. All my kids was taking my money. But anyway, but I could give back, and I wanted to give back in mentoring students. And Madalyn, you talked about SCU Connect. What a great resource! If you don't know about SCU Connect, find it. We have it on our webpage. You can find that. But SU Connect allows you as an alum to jump on and connect with our students, our faculty and staff in a way that you can be a mentor, that you can offer your experience to our students in a way that help connect them to the world of work. And this we're kind of unveiling this in full this semester to our students, and we're excited to get them on and connecting with our alum. And so what a great way to do that. You talked also about Madalyn, about LinkedIn. And if you don't know about that alumni tool, I think we have about 39,000 alumni on there right now. And networking means you have a connection with someone typically. And in that alumni tool, it allows you to connect with people you already naturally connect with, right? And so they're more likely to respond to you when you say, hey, it looks like you're a fellow alum, or hey, it looks like you graduate from SUU. I'm just reaching out to see how did you become so successful in your career or get to where you are, and how do I prepare myself? They're more likely to respond if you kind of go with that natural connection you have.
One of the recommendations I have for my students, Brandon, is exactly that. When you reach out to them on LinkedIn, tell them why, and then ask them, do they have time for a 5 to 10 minute phone conversation? And then get those alums on the phone, ask them questions. Don't ask for a job per se, but ask, why do you love your job? Why do you like where you're working? What challenges do you see facing your industry, your company in the next 6 months? And then do you have anybody else you'd be willing to connect me with? And I've had students do that for great success over the years.
Well, yeah, because naturally when you start talking to these individuals, again, I've said this over and over on this podcast, but what you do is develop a level of trust with people. And when they trust you, they trust you with their opportunities, right? And so you may not be asked for a job now, but you're developing a relationship and developing trust. And then when those opportunities come, guess who they talk to? Yeah, the people they trust, right? They'll come back with that job opportunity.
They'll reach out to you with that job opportunity, absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually do this in a way for my students. I've reached out to over 2,000 alum in the last couple of years, and I've only had one person, not respond to me. And so I think that's a pretty good track record.
That's really good. That means our alumni want to give back, right?
They do.
Thank you, alumni.
And use them, right? Like definitely utilize them. They have all this knowledge. They're like a database for our students.
Absolutely.
Of information.
Brandon and I can't know everything, so I mean it's so great to have this alumni.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, both Brandon and Madalyn, for joining us on this podcast today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget to follow along and subscribe to our podcast and share it with other fellow T-Birds, alumni, and friends. And then don't forget to give us a follow on social media at SU Career Center. We share tips and resources on there. It's a great follow, so make sure to do that. And then tune in next week for our episode on the power of first impressions, dressing for success, and reimagining handshakes in the post-COVID world. And Brandon, why don't you close us off?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I don't know if you two know, but I was actually recently looking on changing careers. I was thinking about becoming a mirror installer. I could just really see myself doing that. So.
Oh, so good.
Madalyn loved it. I can tell already. She's, she gave me the face.
She gave me the face. Awesome. Thanks, listeners. Tune in next week.